If the brutal heat is making you want to crawl into bed, even though you got a to-do list a mile long, and the thought of a hot coffee on a day like today is absolutely unbearable, well, you're not alone. After watching this video, you'll know exactly how to make an easy and refreshing cold coffee at home. Let's brew it. What's up, Brew Crew? I'm Monty. I'm here to help you make an easy cold coffee at home. I have to admit, I'm a new fan of cold coffee, especially during the summer months when the temperatures where I live here in Mexico routinely climb above 100 degrees. By midday here in Merida, Mexico, I usually switch from my morning hot coffee to something cold, refreshing, and just as satisfying. One of the best things about cold coffee is not only is it refreshing, it's one of the easiest and most forgiving ways to make a great cup of coffee at home. All you need to make great cold coffee at home are 3 ingredients: good coffee, bottled water, and a little time. Let me explain. Brewing coffee or coffee extraction is all about getting the right ratio of water to coffee and letting time do its thing. The water slowly dissolves the flavorful and aromatic compounds from the coffee grounds. Here's what makes cold coffee special. Hot water extracts everything quickly: flavors, oils, acids, which can lead to bitter or sour notes if you're even slightly off with your technique. Cold water, on the other hand, extracts more slowly and gently. It doesn't pull out as many of the bitter or acidic compounds, which is why cold coffee usually ends up smoother and naturally sweeter, even if the size of your coffee grounds or timing isn't perfect. That's what makes cold coffee so forgiving. And when you compare buying a 12-ounce bottle of cold brew from Starbucks for nearly $5, making it at home is almost a no-brainer. Another beneficial point for cold coffee is it's super simple to make. You can make cold brew coffee in any large container, no fancy gear required. Just dump in your coffee, add water, give it a stir, and stick it in the fridge for 16 to 24 hours. Once it's ready, you'll need to strain it using either a paper filter or a kitchen strainer. You're ready for a refreshing drink. Now, there are vessels specifically made for cold brew, and they make the process a lot easier. I use the Hario cold brew pot, which I'll put a link in the description notes below, which saves me a ton of time by eliminating the extra filtering step at the end. But before I show you the method I use with the Hario, let me show you the simplest, easiest method to make cold coffee at home using a container I picked up at Walmart. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna grab some water. We're gonna fill up our carafe over here. I'm using filtered water. So you know I live in Mexico, and all of the water in Mexico that we use for cooking and what have you is filtered. So I'm just gonna fill this up to the maximum. Here in my kettle, and this kettle gets a lot of use. This kettle is a temperature controlled kettle, which I like a lot. It's allowed me to brew at temperatures lower than boiling, which a lot of the natural processed coffees, you get all of the fruity flavors when you don't over extract the coffee. So the coffee brewing process is really about the amount of water, the temperature of the water, the size of the grind, right, of your beans, depending on the brewing method, and also the time that you do brew the coffee. First thing I do is measure out 100 grams of fresh coffee beans. Now, pro tip, one of the ways to level up your at-home coffee game is to switch from pre-ground store-bought coffee to whole coffee beans. Pre-ground coffee starts to degrade as soon as the beans are ground and packaged. However, whole coffee beans last longer and are fresher and more aromatic when you grind them. That's an easy switch that anybody can make no matter what method of coffee brewing you use, and that will absolutely take your coffee game up a notch. Now, in order to enjoy fresh coffee in the whole bean form, you're gonna need a burr grinder. I use the Cuisinart electric burr grinder, and I'll leave a link to that in the description notes below, but it was the first burr grinder that I purchased many years ago, and it's still been running strong ever since. I like the Cuisinart electric burr grinder for cold brew because it's easier to grind large batches of coffee. Since this grind is super coarse and the process is relatively forgiving, I don't think there's much benefit in manually grinding 100 grams of coffee. So here's the quick recipe. I'll put it on the screen. Pour in the ground coffee, add water, mix it well, seal the top, and then I asked Siri to set a timer for 16 hours and place it in the refrigerator. Super simple. Once the timer goes off, the ground coffee should have settled to the bottom of the container, which is ideal. But now comes the extra step. You'll need to strain the coffee to separate that liquid gold from the saturated coffee grounds at the bottom. I usually do this using filter paper and my Chemex to get a really clean cup. You could also just use a regular kitchen strainer if you're not picky. This is where the Hario coffee brew pot comes in clutch. So the Hario comes with this filter, and you can see my mug is a little cloudy because I just literally poured out some cold brew. I keep cold brew on deck in the refrigerator, try to every day, so that if I want a quick coffee and I don't have time to make some, I can just pour up a cold brew. I'm gonna pour my 100 grams of coffee into here, then we'll add 1,000 grams of water to the carafe. All right, so here's our 100 grams of coffee added to the Hario. Now the nice thing about it, it doesn't quite fill up. As you can see, there's still some space. So the coffee stops about right here. So that should be below the water level. And if you look at our scale, right down here, we got 100 grams. Next, I take 1,000 milliliters of bottled water and mix it with the grounds in the Hario. Then I ask Siri to set my timer again for 16 hours, and I put the whole thing in the refrigerator. It's that simple, clean, and delicious. The nice thing about the Hario is all I have to do is remove the filter basket, dump the grinds, and I'm ready to pour and drink right then and there. Now there are times when I'm in the middle of that 16-hour window and in between cold brew coffees, and I still want a cold coffee fast. Or sometimes I have a new bag of coffee I want to try as a cold coffee before committing to a whole pitcher of cold brew. In those moments, I turn to one of my favorite brewing tools, the AeroPress. I'll leave a link to the AeroPress in the description notes below. The AeroPress is one of the most forgiving hot brewing methods out there, and it's one that I always recommend for anyone looking to level up their coffee game. So here's my quick go-to homemade cold coffee recipe using the AeroPress. I usually use 24 grams of coffee hand grinding with my Time Moore C3 Chestnut Pro. I use hot water set to 85 degrees using my temperature controlled kettle. I use the inverted AeroPress method for more control. And I pour the ground coffee into the chamber. I add 200 milliliters of hot water, giving me about an 8-to-1 water to coffee ratio for 1 minute and 30 seconds. I then flip over the AeroPress and slow press, aiming for about a 60-second press. In my cup, I've already prepped 100 milliliters of ice, so once I press the coffee over the ice, the total dilution brings me to around a 12.5-to-1 ratio, which is a bold, sweet, and chilled cup of coffee ready to drink in that moment. So there you have it, 3 easy ways to make delicious cold coffee at home. Whether you're using the cold brew method in a mason jar, upgrading to a dedicated Hario cold brew pot, or going with the AeroPress flash chill over ice, you're all set to beat the summer heat and stay caffeinated. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more coffee lovers find great content like this. And if you've got a favorite cold coffee recipe, do me a favor, drop it in the comments below. I'd love to try it out. Same love, new cup. Catch you on the next one, Brew Crew.